Hello, my name is Matthew Pfeiffer. Thank you for joining Toxic to Triumph. I have Rachel Meyer here. She is a deconstructionist, and her and I met on TikTok, and she talks about spiritual abuse in the church, in particular with evangelical Christians. I do want to give a disclaimer that even though we are talking about Christianity, you can for the most part, you can interpret this to whatever spiritual background that you believe in, or that you may be experiencing spiritual abuse, because a lot of this translates to other beliefs as well. So, Rachel, thank you for joining us. And I'll turn it over to you and just tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you're located.
So thank you so much for having me. I was really excited when you reached out. I've done a lot of work, but this is probably something I'm more excited about than other things. But I am located in Atlanta. My husband and I met out in California at a Reformed Bible college. True love story. And then moved back out to here in Atlanta and have pretty much like settled down, found our roots, and hope to continue to live here and grow community here. But kind of my background, is that what you wanted me to go into a little bit? My
uh,
background?
yeah, if you want to, you can go into your background.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, well, it's actually funny. So with the work that I do, I know I'm kind of just like jumping into it. Um, a lot of people assume that I've been Christian my whole life, but I've actually not been. I was actually raised to my dad was raised in Roman Catholicism and grew up to kind of resent uh, organized religion. So a lot of my childhood was my mom trying to get us to go to church and my dad resisting it and saying that organized religion was controlling all of this stuff. And so I actually grew up an atheist. And so I did not convert to Christianity until I was 20, after some like life events happened.
Mhm.
And then yeah, it was like a few years of experiencing a lot in the church. And I think it really benefited me because I came in with fresh eyes and as an adult, not being indoctrinated from a young age. And like very quickly did a turnaround and like saw how much was happening after a few years of experiencing it myself. And now I advocate for people who are coming out of that as well. So
That's interesting because I was raised in it.
mhm,
And one of the toughest things when you're raised in it is that now it's a part of conditioning,
mhm.
right? So you are coming with it with a fresh pair of eyes. But I'm curious, because you said that you weren't raised in it, but you also went to Bible college. Were you looking at becoming a pastor?
No, so I converted to Christianity when I was 20. And all of my peers around me knew so much more than me because they had been raised with the Bible stories and all of this stuff. And, I think I saw the Prince of Egypt when I was 4, and that was my extent um, of Bible knowledge, I
Mhm.
guess. I didn't know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were like different accounts of the same story. I thought it was my concept of the Bible just was not there.
Right.
And so I had to move out to California to take care of my grandparents. And I found a little Bible college up in Simi Valley. It's called Eternity, um, by Francis Chan, if anybody knows who he is. But I started attending there just so that I could get an understanding of the Bible, in like a setting that would help me learn quickly,
Mhm.
because church, I was like so zealous and church just wasn't doing it for me. I wanted to learn as much, make up for lost time, all that stuff. And it actually was a reformed school,
Mhm.
and I now resent reformed doctrine more than probably any other doctrine for that
Mhm.
reason, because I just saw how much harm it did. Yeah, so that's kind of my goal was never to use it to become a pastor or anything. I just, as a young, zealous Christian, just thought that I was going to like witness to the world, do all those fun things. And that was just going to be something underneath my tool belt to have credibility to speak.
Tell
So,
me more about, okay, so we know how you got into it.
mhm.
When did the light bulbs start going off where you started to question things a bit?
So I will use this disclaimer. I was, as I've told you in the past, my dad was, very abusive to me growing up. He was a narcissist. And I was his scapegoat. My older sister was his golden child. And it was very obvious that favoritism. Um, and so when I converted to Christianity, I found a mentor who I didn't realize it at the time, but like showed a lot of the same traits as my
Hmm.
dad. She's a single woman in her 40s. I thought she was really incredible. Um, but I had never felt what it was like to be a golden child. So I was receiving this like love and affection from this person. It was like a lot of love bombing, a lot of, you know, as long as I believed what she believed,
Hmm.
I was good, and it was such an extreme like belief system that she had, like,
Hmm.
you know, as extreme as you can get, like I had like a skull on my entryway that was like bull horns or something.
Hmm.
And she was like, Rachel, you know that that's demonic and you need to take it down. You have a child in your house now, like, and at the time, like it was, oh yeah, like she would never lie to me, like she knows everything kind of
Hmm.
thing. And um in 2015 is when I really started, realizing some stuff that just was not right. Because in our relationship, it was
And
like
just so you know, I'm laughing because I was taught that Scooby-Doo was demonic.
you like think back to these things and like
Mhm. Right.
it's just every shadow is like another like possibility to pull you away from like
Right.
this God that is supreme and like loving and draws you in
Hmm.
and all the stuff that you're told, but then it's like a little like thing that I bought at Target is
Hmm.
gonna compromise my,
Hmm.
relationship with him
Right.
apparently.
Uh-huh.
Scooby-Doo, can't just do it.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
so she yeah, it was a very dogmatic relationship where I had to continually, it was like I had a confessional with her every time we talked on the phone. It was really, which was like 3 times a week.
Hmm.
She was like my mom, because
Hmm.
I'd never known what it felt like to be poured into and loved in a way that like somebody who is still unhealthy, you know, I just didn't recognize it from that side because I'd never been on that side.
Did they refer to her as your spiritual mother?
Oh, yeah, and
Hmm.
oh, that's what I was gonna say, it was,
Hmm.
like, the exclusivity of our
Hmm.
relationship. She called me her Timothy, and she
Hmm.
was like Paul, and she called me Timothy,
Hmm.
and so it was like I was so special, and I couldn't do anything to mess up that relationship. And it's so crazy just, like, thinking about it now, because she tried to mentor other, like, young women around my age, and she would just always come back to me, "Rachel, they aren't like you. You're special," like, all this stuff, and it just like, it really made me feel good because my whole life I had been you know, emotionally just in emotionally lacking in my own
Right.
relationships with my parents. So yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that golden child syndrome. When people hear me talk about the golden child from a narcissist perspective, they think initially people think that the golden child hasn't made because they're treated well. And I'm doing air quotes for those of you who can't see me. Um, but what people don't understand is as the golden child, there's a lot of pressure to maintain that image and a lot of pressure. And it really honestly doesn't feel good
Yeah.
to the golden child. So I imagine that's how you felt, at the time. Just a lot of pressure.
Mhm.
Um, how does this transition from you being her golden child, being her Timothy, and her being Paul and everything to you now start this deconstruction? And
Mhm.
and as we're talking about deconstruction, what exactly is deconstruction?
So deconstruction is like a festering of questions and unrest and just like an undeniable pain, like
Hmm.
in your current situation where it just seems impossible to keep on going down the same path. Or if you are going down the same path, it just is like compromising a lot of like mental health and what like in your heart of hearts is not right. And so a lot of deconstruction is confronting those things maybe for the first time in your life, because I know a lot of Christianity preaches self-denial,
Mhm.
which like translates over into self-hate. Like people think that self-denial is self-hate when that's a whole different conversation. But it's like surfacing these questions and being honest with yourself for the first time of what's painful and what is harmful thinking within Christianity that you've been taught.
Mhm.
And so deconstruction is like pulling that string of, okay, here's my first question. And then it just all unraveling. And you
Mhm.
just realizing and coming to terms with the fact that maybe what you've been told your whole life isn't what you believed it to be. Or, maybe there are alternative views out there that you never considered before because you were told they were demonic or backsliding or falling away. And it's a really, really painful process. I remember through my deconstruction, which started in 2015, which I'll get back to in a moment. Um, it was like the worst depression I think I had ever been through. And I have been through so much.
Mhm.
But it was not only like the judgment of people, but you are terrified that this like all-knowing, loving father
Mhm.
who has the ability in that belief system to send you to hell in a moment, to, end your life, to do all of these things, like make you suffer, to come back to him,
Mhm.
discipline you, all of these things. So it's constant fear, it's
Yeah.
constant pain, like what if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
and it's not ending because he's omnipresent, he's omniscient, so
He's inside of you. He's in your mind. He's in your heart. So even if you think these things, you're going to hell, and you shouldn't
Absolutely.
even, God forbid, like you find another woman attractive. I'm not even talking about lusting over her, but when you don't even really know yourself, like, is this lust, or am I just genuinely attracted? Like, because I want to have sex with this girl, but I'm not married, and I'm only, 15, and I'm still
Mhm.
learning myself, let alone like,
Yeah,
this father figure God who's inside of me, who knows every single thought. And so, yeah,
that's the
it can be intimidating.
right, and it like nowhere feels safe.
Hmm.
Like even when you get rid of triggers and people like leave you alone, about your beliefs, it's like you still feel very unsafe and insecure because it's in your head. You can't
Hmm.
get it out, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so a lot of deconstruction is reclaiming that autonomy and agency that the church does not foster.
Hmm.
Because I feel like what I've learned through my own process and my own healing is, um, like when I converted to Christianity, it was like my agency flew out the window. Like
Hmm.
I was socially awkward for the first time in my life. Like I was really confident, and then I came to convert, and not everybody experiences this, but I know for me, um, it was like, okay, I have to keep up with these people. I have to, be a Christian. What does that mean?
Hmm.
It means loving God. Okay, well, I'm going to love God the best because, it's going to cover up everything that I hate about myself. But then my self hatred just kept on getting worse and worse,
Hmm.
the more I was failing.
Hmm.
And, a lot of people say that Christianity is about morality and knowing the measure of morality. Um, but I, when I was an atheist, didn't do anything incredibly immoral, talking about like, I don't want to address anything that like you would consider immoral. I don't want to like shame anybody, but
Right.
then when I became a Christian, it was like, okay, the list of immoral things are now indefinitely more wrong,
Hmm.
where I was not really harming anybody before Christianity. And now it's like everything is a harm, you
Hmm.
know, in terms of morality. So
Hmm.
it just became very strenuous and, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, deconstruction is just a process of confrontation and
Yeah.
realizing that you are worth finding the answers,
Hmm.
and you are worth healing in a way that is something that works for you, because it's not a one size fits all. Some people can do Reformed Christianity, evangelical Christianity, and they don't experience trauma from it.
Hmm.
I kind of view that as a privileged thing, because a
Mhm.
lot of people do go through trauma, and there's generational trauma in their life where they can't just pray and read the Bible and
Right.
heal. Because there's CPTSD, there's OCD, there's ADHD, there's, a lot of other brain behaviors that you can't just simply do, spiritual bypassing with.
Right. Absolutely.
Um, and so for somebody who hasn't been traumatized and has safe attachment in their family, that seems absolutely shocking that
Mhm.
somebody can't just pray and read the Bible to overcome certain obstacles,
Right.
you know, because it's from a place of privilege. You did not
Mhm.
have to go through what a lot of people go through in their lifetime,
Mhm.
and have to do other things for healing.
And
Uh,
when does this get when does this when does this move over from, just kind of a problem and indoctrination and, these head games, we'll call them, right? And about morality
mhm.
into spiritual abuse.
I think anybody denying somebody's agency,
Hmm.
um, using fear and manipulation as a way to ensure that you stay within a specific belief system, or
I want to, before you go to the next point, I want to add two more to that fear.
yes.
Because when we're talking about fear and when we're talking about manipulation, we have to talk about what is it called? I'm losing my train of thought. Emotional blackmail, fear, obligation, and guilt. Right. And
Yeah.
those are the three things that emotional manipulators, especially in the church, use. They'll make you feel obligated, right? Because if you don't, God sees you.
Hmm.
Guilty if you don't do this because now the church is going without things like that. But I was going to say I didn't mean to cut you off, but I did mean to
Oh,
cut you off.
yeah.
But go ahead, continue.
Cut me off. You are the professional, so anything that you have to add is amazing. And I think when somebody says that the way that you are choosing to heal is wrong,
Mhm,
and tries to interject their understanding onto you,
mhm,
because that right there just negates anything that the person is experiencing, and making their lived experience less than, and puts it under to, how do I say this, makes it
they devalue it.
not about the person. Yeah, they devalue the person,
Mhm,
and it's no longer about them, it's only about protecting this belief system.
mhm,
um and it's funny because, like, the more work I do, the more, like, hostile I realize people in evangelical Christianity and certain types of Christianity are, because you're challenging this thing that they've been trained to defend.
mhm,
Because if you critique the church and church practices and toxic theology, which were never uh, meant to become theological concepts,
mhm,
it is like attacking them,
mhm,
because they have been told that their life and their worth is to defend the gospel.
mhm,
And, like, anything that you do to defend the gospel is love.
mhm,
And so love then becomes whatever, the end justifies the means. So
mhm,
if you are traumatized, and I had a friend specifically say this to me, I was in her wedding, best friend, roomed with her at Bible college. Um, I had a friend say to me, who was no longer my friend, that because I was traumatized by the gospel and things that I experienced in the church, it's because I never knew the real Jesus,
mhm,
because theology is supposed to be painful, and the gospel is supposed to be painful. And therefore, because it got to the point of traumatizing me, it was just because I never was saved. And
yeah,
it's like that, like that cognitive dissonance. And I know that's kind of like a poppy word right now, but to convince yourself that theology and a relationship with Jesus actually is supposed to be painful to the point of traumatizing,
mhm.
um, is not it.
No.
I'll just simply put it like that.
And it's, when you're dealing with people like that, it's very like circular, where it's like, okay, you're saying that this God is healing and it's going to make life better, and I'm going to have peace, and then you're also saying that it's traumatizing, right?
But
That
never
I'm
promise
supposed to.
happiness.
Was that?
Exalt your feelings over him.
Yep. Hmm.
It's like,
Yeah, cast your cares on him. Just that, which is, when we're talking professionally, we're talking clinically. No, you can't just cast your care, act like things aren't happening, cast your cares on other people and things like that. You actually have to process your emotions, so those type of things 100% don't work. They definitely don't fly. What about, when spiritual abuse, when it comes to like the actual leadership and pastors, is that something that you have seen often or have experienced or other people have experienced?
Yeah. I think that the institution does a very good job at protecting abusers
Hmm.
because to the outside world, they need to look perfect. And so, case in point, and I'm going to name drop Ravi Zacharias.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you knew who he was. He passed away last year of cancer, sadly, but um, he was accused of sexual assault.
Hmm.
And a lot of victims came forward while he was still alive, and he sued them to silence them.
Hmm.
Um, and the ministry did no investigation of their own, nothing. They just went with Ravi's word, all of that stuff. And he is like one of the biggest apologists. I think I'm saying that correctly. That is like world renowned.
Hmm.
Really, really brilliant mind.
Hmm.
I disagree with him wholeheartedly with his theology, but a very respectable person in that way. So after he passed away, it came back up, and a lot of his victims again came forward, and the ministry released a statement like, we didn't know, it's coming out that these accusations are true, all of this stuff. And it was one of those moments of like reflection where they absolutely did know,
Hmm.
and they did not take accountability, and instead they victim blamed.
Hmm.
And that is where the church really, really thrives, is that they don't they might recognize areas where people aren't perfect in the church. The church was never supposed to, be perfect, whatever. Um, but the gaslighting, manipulation, and victim blaming that is placed on an individual believer,
Hmm.
um, by the institution is like a very, very common way to practice spirituality
Hmm.
in the institution.
Hmm.
So, I go to church and I have a hard time with a certain way that a leader's behaving. I just have to trust Jesus more.
Hmm.
I just have to, trust my leadership more.
Hmm.
I have to take it up with God. It is my responsibility to suppress what I know is abuse and abusive theology, because I'm not allowed to challenge that.
Hmm.
I have to take it up with God.
Yeah.
And so it like creates this like cycle of, okay, well, anytime I try and challenge anything, it's just, it always turns back on me. I'm not trusting God enough. I'm not. So it keeps like this, it keeps victims in their place.
Hmm.
And it's very, very, very hard to break that cycle. And narcissists are protected, especially in that environment, because, you know, if we're talking about like the golden child or like the
Hmm.
golden system, like their staff is afraid of them usually, or not afraid of them like here, but they're afraid of them. If they make a wrong action or they speak out against them, they'll lose their golden child
Hmm.
status, or they'll lose that place in leadership. And so it's like the pastors don't even really have to do anything. They have
Hmm.
their like congregants doing the work for them.
Hmm. Which
They
become
don't
their flying
realize.
monkeys and their narcissistic harem is basically what it is. And um, I know some people are saying that not all churches are bad, and I get that and I understand that, but it is very problematic, and it's problematic in a lot of churches. And even if you have a great pastor, you can have some terrible assistant pastors, or vice versa. And the problem is that when we talk about abuse and we talk about a narcissistic mask, um, people use places like the church as a part of that mask, because when people tell you that they're Christian, or you see people carrying a Bible and things like that, you assume that they are moral, exactly how you were talking about earlier, right? That they're moral, that they are going to make the right decisions, that
Yeah.
they are there to help It's just like like a police officer, if they're, or a firefighter, that if they're in uniform, right, that you just assume that they're going to do the right thing, but that's just not always the case.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's part of it is like, especially from like a child's perspective, you're indoctrinated from a very young age to trust your leadership, not question it. Or like they'll be like, my leader's not like that. They always let me question. Well, do they always have a hand in pointing you back to the same thing?
Hmm.
And I know that's kind of their job, but at the same time, like there's a point where it becomes too too much
Hmm.
and too controlled,
Hmm.
and there is no freedom, and
Right.
they don't realize it because it's all they've ever known.
Right.
So like a pastor to them is supposed to always point them back to the specific theological understanding of God.
Hmm.
There's heavy fear mongering around if that doesn't happen. Oh yeah, go question, have fun, prodigal son. And it's like,
Hmm.
man, that's so like you're immediately labeling somebody as lost
Hmm.
and broken if they
Hmm.
start questioning. And
Right.
so they have this like belief of themselves that, okay, I have these questions, but if I don't take them seriously and I
Hmm.
don't take my gut feeling and my God given like instinct serious consideration, then I'm okay
Yeah.
because I'm not a prodigal son. I'm not broken.
Hmm.
God still loves me.
Yeah.
All of this stuff. And it's just like, yeah.
We should, and for people listening, you should 100, regardless if we're talking about church or like a workplace environment, you should be able to ask questions, right, without being ridiculed. You should be able to, and you should be able to check that with multiple resources. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Even people that I work with, I don't send them only to my videos. I send them to multiple people's videos, so then they can come to their own conclusion, right?
Mm,
They do their own research, uh, and by doing that, it allows for people. You're really empowering people instead of making decisions for them. But when you're sending them to just one source the entire time, right,
mhm.
it's nothing short of brainwashing,
Yeah.
manipulation.
And I think that's what's sad is like a lot of people experiencing that golden child effect
Hmm.
or, denying themselves exploring, questioning. It's this false sense of security.
Hmm.
Um, and it keeps them stuck. And I always go back to, all right, when I started questioning, my questioning began in Revelation. That
Hmm.
really was like the pull and
Hmm.
unraveling for me. Um, Truth should stand,
Hmm.
and the more that I looked into things, the more I was getting really uncomfortable under certain leadership at the church, really uncomfortable by certain like rules set in place.
Hmm.
I found a really awesome church before the pandemic. Um, and I found out that they didn't let LGBTQ people in leadership. And
Hmm.
I left because it
Hmm.
was not something that I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's not. And so it just, where before it would be like, okay, I can overlook that. Now it's like, I will not compromise,
Hmm.
and I will not let what I feel is love and truth and my healing and my advocacy for somebody get in the way of theological understanding.
Hmm.
Because if there is a God and
Hmm.
there is an all loving, all knowing deity,
Hmm.
um, I hope that he would understand when I die that I did everything that I could to love his children.
Hmm.
And I can't consciously attend a church I know that suppresses and oppresses people that are his children,
Right.
whether it's scriptural or not,
Right.
you know.
It,
Um,
it's interesting that you say that, because I posted a video the other day about questioning someone who was questioning certain music that people are listening to. And if you go to the comments, people were saying things like, they were talking about purity, and they were talking about, you should, it's not in God's will to listen to this type of music. And the problem that I have with it, and really what I was and I wish I had 5 minutes to speak on it, because really what I wanted to point out to people is everyone's worried about the music you listen to, Scooby Doo and the horns from, Target,
Tattoo, yeah.
the words that you say, because someone pointed out the fact that I used vulgar language. But I don't, I don't hear pastors talking about abuse from the pulpit. I don't hear them talking about real live issues. And to me, if if God is more concerned with me saying a borderline swear word or the music that I listen to, and he's more concerned with that than he is in purity, than he is with abuse and people being manipulated and people being in domestic violence in the home. Is it really a loving God? Because that's the presentation that the church is giving.
Yeah, I completely agree. And a lot of what I studied in my degree was mission work. And um, so this was after the Reformed College when I was receiving my degree in religion
Mhm.
from a secular university. And it was from scholarly sources that were not opinion based, which I appreciate.
Mhm.
So a lot of it was looking at the roots of how mission work got started. And we did a lot of study of the Norwegian Mission Society in Zululand. Sorry, I kind of brushed over that. But how when the Norwegian Mission Society brought over the gospel to the Zulu people, they did so by bringing their culture.
Mhm.
And so it was the Zulu people went off a month schedule, not a week. They had circle houses. They dressed differently. And when when the Norwegian missionaries created houses, they were square. They started making people go off of a 7-day week. They had a requirement for dressing if you were to be under their school. Um, and and they built their fencing around areas that people needed to walk through to get to different parts, and taxed people as they were walking through. I thought that that was so interesting.
Mhm.
So they come to Zulu land and tax the natives
Mhm.
to walk through. It just, anyway, all that to say, what I have a problem with is that God would bless colonization,
Mhm.
and especially the roots of America,
Mhm.
if we want to look at that. But and that was okay.
Mhm.
You know, like killing, mass murdering,
Right.
displacing, um, that's moral.
Mhm.
And then, especially the rise of what's been happening this year. I don't want to get
Right.
political,
Mhm.
um, but a lot of hypocrisy that's in the church that's making a lot of people upset. How the mark of morality now is a particular party.
Mhm.
And if you're not in that particular party, Jesus is going to come back and save us from you guys,
Mhm.
So it was okay when, everybody came over and colonized and murdered and sexually assaulted and all of those things. Jesus didn't come back then, but
Mhm.
he's going to come back now, you know, when I think that social justice and all of this movement is actually pleasing, and
Yeah.
it's right.
Mhm.
But it's just such this jaded idea of self-love is bad,
Mhm.
advocating for certain things are bad,
Mhm.
and Jesus needs to come and save us from that. That just blows my mind, and why I have such an issue with morality in the church, because
Mhm.
it's so skewed and
Yep.
it's so based off of these purity culture,
Yep.
which is notorious to of being harmful. And it does victim blaming.
Mhm.
It excuses sexual assault because it's
Mhm.
the woman's fault.
Mhm.
um it Oh my gosh, like you could go on and on, but
Mhm.
that's not a problem,
Mhm.
because it somehow leads to women keeping their virginity until marriage, which
Yeah.
it doesn't.
Right.
it just breeds shame, you know. The
Rachel,
blackmail.
Rachel, thank you very much. We are running out of time, but I could I could talk about this with you all day because it's it hits a little too close to home. But I'm definitely gonna be watching Scooby Doo from now on,
Yeah.
and
I'm gonna
so
go buy a statue from Target.
yeah, let's do it. You go buy a statue. I'm gonna go watch Scooby Doo. But anyone who's listening, if you want to follow Rachel, and if you want to know more about what she does and want more information from her on Instagram, you can go to your favorite heretics, and on TikTok it's at Carrot Slayer, and those will be in the show notes. But once again, Rachel, thank you very much. Do you have any closing thoughts, or if you want to just say bye to everyone?
It was wonderful being on here. Thank you so much. Yeah, your healing's worth it. That's all
Thank
I
you.
gotta say.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.